Hello. My name is Pat O'Brien. I am a first-year MBA student here at MIT Sloan, and I was the student lead for bringing back the hockey panel after a year hiatus. We have an awesome group of individuals here today to talk to you. From my left to right, Brian Burke of the Calgary Flames, Don Fishman of the Washington Capitals, Don Sweeney of the Boston Bruins, Mark Dennehy of Merrimack College, Eric Tulsky from SB Nation, and our moderator today is going to be Dale Arnold from Nesson here in Boston. For planning purposes, the panel is going to go until about 3:20 p.m. We'll plan to have about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A from the audience. And if you've been to panels before, we're looking to tweet or text our questions in if you want them answered. For texting purposes, you can text to 22333 and just lead with the keyword Ice Age. All one word, Ice Age. For tweets, same thing, except you're going to tweet at poll and use the same Ice Age prompt. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dale, and thanks for being here, guys.
Last spring, the proudest moment of my life was when my son Taylor received his PhD in statistics from Yale University. You'll understand my confusion when Katie called and asked if I could be here. I assumed they had the wrong Arnold. Having said that, I will try to make up for my lack of statistical acumen by a willingness to learn and a love for the game. A year ago, well, maybe it was 2 years ago now, because they didn't have the hockey analytics last year. 2 years ago, I believe, an old and dear friend of mine at this very event said the following: "Statistics are like a lamppost to a drunk, useful for support, but not for illumination." Berkey, has anything changed your opinion since then?
No. No. My daughter Katie told me not to use that quote this year because it was getting old,
But I did.
yeah, no, my view on it is that statistics have great value to us. You ignore them at your peril, but that an analysis that aids us in drafting or trading has not been performed that I've seen that has great value. I think it's still an eyeballs business. You have to go watch players play. We watch for a lot of things at games that even video scouting won't show you, how players respond when a coach yells at them, or if they're on the ice and they make a play and allow a bad goal, how they react, body English, how they rally the teammates, things like that. So I think it's an eyeballs business. And I think there's a lot of confusion between mathematics or simple arithmetic or statistics and analytics. You know, some people say, well, we use statistics for that. Well, that's just mathematics. That's the face-off percentage. You know, everyone uses that. Everyone keeps that. Everyone rates their players. The analytics to me are where you can take that data and turn it into something that gives me an edge in drafting or trading for players. Statistics we use, but even there, they're misleading. Like, you know, we play San Jose. They've got 12 face-off plays. Okay, so they'll run them in a game, and any 50-50 puck where the centers in a face-off don't win the draw cleanly all the time, as you all know. So the puck's 2 feet away, it's lying there. San Jose's run a play, so their guys coming in no matter what happens. They recover the puck. The league records that as a San Jose face-off win. Well, we don't. That's a 50-50 puck that we lost on a secondary battle. So to me, statistics are a key part of our game. We all use them. Analytics that have been of great value in baseball, I haven't seen the same value here.
You bring up an interesting point. Talking to some of my friends in the Patriots organization, they believe basically none of the NFL statistics. They keep their own. If at the end of the game, the NFL tells you that Gerard Mayo had 11 tackles, the Patriots' video breakdown of the same game may show that he had 16 tackles. Don, do you guys end up doing the same thing Berkey was talking about, where you're almost doing your own statistical breakdown of these things because the numbers the league puts out aren't necessarily accurate?
Which Don are you looking at?
Oh, yeah, Fishman, I'm sorry.
This one?
Yeah, that one.
I think we do our own, and we use them in combination with the NHL's. But one nice thing about using a league source or another source is that it's objective, is you get an objective look at stats. When you do your own stats, it's subjective, and it's subject to your own prejudices, which are a lot if it's your own team. So I think it's a combination of them, but I agree with Brian. There's no one killer statistic that's leading our sport now in the right direction, but I think all the stats together are helping us get better answers.
Eric, I'm going to swing to this end to ask you this simple question. My sabermetrician friends tell me that the most useless statistic in baseball is batting average, followed very closely by RBI, because they basically don't mean anything anymore. If there was a statistic you could throw out, or an analytic that you could throw out from hockey, what would it be?
So plus minus, the one that comes to mind. In hockey, there just aren't very many goals in a game, and so there's a lot of random noise in how many goals a guy happens to be on the ice for. A season seems like a long time, but if you're only going to be on the ice for, say, 100 goals, there's a lot of chance for a few flukes here and there to really skew things. And so that's why in the stat community, we've really moved from the goal-based measures to the shot-based measures for the most part. There's a lot more shots per game, and so you get a lot more meaning out of that.
Berkey brought up an interesting point. When the Red Sox a number of years ago hired the father of sabermetrics, Bill James, and I remember asking Theo Epstein, who was then the general manager of the team, I said, how do you make sure you get the most bang for your buck from these numbers? How do you know that what he gives you is meaningful to you? And I'll never forget the quote. He said, we have to walk a fine line between hard metrics and windbreakers. And what he meant was the old scout wearing the windbreaker, sitting behind the backstop, watching the kid play the game. And that you didn't let your eyeballs necessarily be swayed from something that your mind told you was true, but the numbers tell you was not true. Donnie, do you find, Don Sweeney this time, do you find that there's that same almost diametrically opposed thing going on here where numbers say one thing, but a scout will tell you something different?
Well, a scout found me somehow in a windbreaker, so I'd have to defer to the fact that, as Brian points out, that the sight test has to be there. You have to have viewings on players. Where I think the analytical side, to blend them together, to sort of uncover or take away blind spots that we all might have. You might have seen a player at his high side in that particular viewing, and another person saw him at his low side. Well, where's his real value? From a draft scenario, from a player acquisition scenario. I think the biggest evolvement in our sport has been the quality of video that's produced. That you can now go in between games or game to game to take, mining the data from the NHL, which, as Don pointed out, is somewhat objective. Obviously, it's subjective to the person who's charting it himself, but we can then look at within that game, in game to game, maybe line combinations and things where what players are producing value based on the video and the data and merging them together.
Mark, I'm assuming you don't have the same financial resources at Merrimack that the Bruins, Capitals, or Flames have.
No, you'd assume correct.
So how do you go about getting as much data as you can, utilizing it as best you can, without the same resources to work with?
Well, a couple ways, and video is a really useful tool, and we do have the luxury of using similar types of video breakdown systems where we can chart shot attempts, and so it'll give us a little bit of an access to Corsi, which is one that we track. And then also, just to be honest with you, and probably one of the reasons I'm sitting up here, calling on some of the pro guys and maybe getting some of their analytics and trying to sort of patch it into what we're doing. And then the last part is we're lucky enough to have a math department at Merrimack College, and Professor Bradley's nice enough to share some of his sports management students, and so we've actually put them to work and given them some assignments. That's been helpful as well.
Berkey, do you think that there are some of the advanced analytics, Corsi, Fenwick, some of those, the puck possession analytics, which you do find useful?
Some of them are useful. Like Eric mentions plus minus. I remember Harry Sinden, when I was a young GM, telling me he thought it was a totally useless statistic. I mean, when we play a team like we played last night, we have a line that plays against their best line. We're not a very good team. And so most of our players are minus. And I think if you forget everything else from this conference, remember, if you're on a horseshit team, you're probably a minus player. There, I tell you. A very useful analytical tool. So, I think it has very limited value. I think, the way shots are blocked now, shots attempted that diminishes that value too. Save percentage has obviously become much more important than goals against in terms of how teams analyze goaltenders to adjust for whether a team is competent or not. But Like I say, someone found Donnie Sweeney. All right, he had a pretty good NHL career, cerebral player. Someone went and looked. Someone didn't find him in a database back then. Someone went and looked and watched him play. And you got to find out what family values this kid has, what his perseverance level is. If he grew up on a farm, he probably knows how to work, those type of things. And that's, like I say, and we've made, everyone up here, Donnie and I, anyone who's worked in pro hockey for any length of time has made some horrible mistakes of drafting and trading. That's how it works. If we had 3 hours, I could tell you about all the bad decisions I've made. But the key is you got to be right on more than you're wrong. And if you swing for the fence once in a while, you're going to strike out. Like I listened to the last panel, they talked about trading up and drafting a player. Every time you do that, there's an element of risk. The team that traded that pick is confident you're going to mess that pick up. So, you see some big mistakes, but if you're going to swing for the fence, you're going to strike out. And if you want to live the life of a coward and not swing for the fence, then that's not how we do things in our job.
It seems to me, too, that analytic analysis, while useful, misses on the intangibles. And Donnie Sweeney, you've got a player on your team who I think is the epitome of that, in Patrice Bergeron. Now, I can tell you that at the Olympic break, he led the NHL in relative Corsi at 22.4. What I can't tell you with those numbers is what he means to a hockey team. And I think the Canadian Olympic team found that out through the course of the tournament, where he went over to Sochi with a certain role, and by the end of the tournament, he was on the first line, playing with Sidney Crosby. How do you quantify intangibles? Going back to Berkey's point, what kind of guy is he? What kind of upbringing does he have? How do you search that stuff out? How do you quantify it?
Well, I don't know if you can necessarily quantify it in terms of that particular player. A lot of times the intangibles define that particular player. Where we look at it and say, what's the value to the Boston Bruins is what Patrice brings to the table. And I think that's where the analytics, you can look at we look at what type of shot quality is being produced or not being produced while Patrice is on the ice and the players that he's playing with. So the next step would be, does he elevate other people's play while he's on the ice? Can you play anybody with Patrice, and is he going to produce the same type of value, in your team? And that's sort of where you can get into the line combination side of it and game-by-game analysis to say, okay, this player with this set of line mates is producing such, with this other set of line mates, he's not producing as much. And you realize that Patrice is generally the constant, involved in that. But I think you do get value out of the residual aspect of who he's playing with, because he's that player. And there are very few of those players. In most of the analytic books that I've read in the hockey side of it, Patrice comes up as a possession, home run type player. And the intangibles sort of define that, but as Brian would say, you got to scratch below the surface of the character of the player in order to unearth that. The skill will always be there for these guys, but how it's used, from a development standpoint, what we're looking at and saying, what's the courage level of that player? I don't know if there's a statistic out there that's going to evaluate that when you go back for a puck.
And he's not the same player on our team. He doesn't produce the same value. He's a great player,
right?
But he's not going to have the same statistical success on our team.
Going back to that horseshit hockey team quote from a few minutes ago.
Exactly.
Don Fishman, you've got the player who is the perfect dichotomy between talent and statistics. Because I look at the statistics for Alexander Ovechkin, and other than goals scored, I'm hard-pressed to find numbers that are going to knock my hat in the creek. In fact, I'm going to find some that are going to tell me he's not a very good hockey player, but my eyes tell me something different.
And last night, when there was 4 minutes left in the game and it was a tie game, and Brooks Light came down on a 2-on-1, he passed the puck over to number 8, and most forwards might have missed that chance, but Alex put it in the net. And that's the thing that analytics sometimes misses, is who's going to score it when it's winning time? Who's going to score the tying goal against the Flyers when we're coming back? He comes on the ice with a minute left. He puts the puck in the net to tie the game. It's Alex. And that's an extra quality I'd love for analytics to dive into, which is, when it's winning time, basketball talks about that. When it's winning time, who produces? Who's going to score that goal when it's winning time? TJ Oshie scored the goal in the shootout for the U.S. That's an intangible. And Alex has that intangible. He's a goal scorer. But you're right, a lot of the statistics paint him the opposite way too. Obviously, plus minus does. But that's what makes this business fun. You've got players like Patrice Bergeron, and you've got players like Alex, two completely different players, and you've got to somehow use all the statistics, goals, assists, points, Corsi, shots, everything to understand that player. And I think that's why we're all up here. You've got to use everything to understand that player, or else you're not going to understand Patrice Bergeron, and you're not going to understand Alex.
And who wants that puck at that point in the game? There's a lot of players who don't want that puck. And they're like, geez, I might miss. The goalie might stop it. There's a fear factor. There's a lot of great actors that are off Broadway. You put them on Broadway and they freeze. Who wants that puck at that point in the game? Who wants to be the hero or be the GOAT? A lot of players don't want that awful pressure that comes with that. Alex wanted that puck last night.
Eric, you developed something called score-adjusted Fenwick, which is a way, it has become a predictive tool, almost, of how you think a team is going to perform based on the analytics that you've developed and then follow. How accurate is it?
You know, it's moderately accurate. It's tough to predict hockey. You know, you're talking about games that are 2-1, 3-1. It's easy for an inferior team to pull out a win in any given game. And so, you know, if you're talking about predicting 30, 40, 50 games, you can do okay. If you're talking about predicting a 7-game series, you're always going to struggle a little bit. It's, you know, whether you're using your eyeballs or your, you know, average commentator analysis, or someone who's looking only at stats, or someone who's looking at all of it, you know, it's always going to be tough to predict because it's just the nature of the game. Any random amounts can make changes. What we like about it is that you can demonstrate that it's a pretty, that it does better than looking at their current record or their current goals scored. And so, you know, it's a step forwards from reading the standings. It's a big step forward from reading the standings. It's still never going to be perfect, and, you know, nothing will be.
Mark, when you've got a young kid playing for you at Merrimack, are the only 2 stats that matter to that young man goals and assists?
I would hope that wins come into play for my own job security.
So he has to be a goaltender for that one.
I mean, again, and to reiterate what Brian started with, I mean, we use stats. Everybody uses stats. And you know, the guys like Ovechkin and you know, Sidney Crosby, you know, their numbers just speak volumes. You don't have to go under the surface to find the value of those players. You know, for us, I mean, we're struggling right now. I've got some guys that aren't scoring a lot of goals. So I'm trying to find the value in these guys. And so you do want to look under the surface at what sort of puck possession they have. You know, are they winning face-offs? You know, are they blocking shots? What are they doing to help your team win? And as hard as it is to predict the NHL, trust me when I tell you, it's even harder to predict college. You've got young people, you know, you don't know if they had a test that morning, their girlfriend broke up with them, or they didn't have any clean clothes, and they had to do the laundry. There's all sorts of variables that do not come into play. You know, so, yeah, obviously goals and assists are important. They should be important to every player. But you can add value to a team beyond that as well.
The National Football League is a salary cap league, as the NHL is. Recently, the NFL assigned their franchise tag numbers. And it's not hard to figure out. Quarterback is the most expensive position. Franchise tag is $14.9 million. Second is defensive end, by the way. That's $11.1 million. Bottom of the scale, the 3 bottom numbers are running back, safety, and punter/kicker. In a salary cap league like you guys are involved in, Brian, do you find that you're trying to figure out what's the most valuable position? Is it goaltender? Is it a shutdown defenseman? Is it a 40-goal scorer up front? Are you finding that in a salary cap league you're trying to allocate your resources based on an analysis of things like that?
Yes. In a hard cap system, I don't know if Donnie and Donnie do it the same way. You can basically draw 12 boxes for your 12 forwards, 6 boxes beneath them for your 6 defensemen, and 2 boxes for your goaltenders, and you got to make that add up to less than the cap. Rule number 1 is, unless you draft well and have players on entry-level contracts, you cannot have star players on your team. So if you're going to pay guys $6, $7, $8 million, you've got to have guys making $820 on entry-level contracts or $920 for the math to work if you're a cap team. We're not a cap team at this point. So you are constantly, as you evaluate what your team's going to look like in those boxes, you have numerical values in there, and they've got to add up to less than the cap. If you're going to have star players, it means you better draft well too, because you've got to have players that are on entry-level contracts. So the year we were fortunate enough to win a cup in Anaheim, we had star players. We had Teemu Selanne, we had Scott Niedermayer, but we also had Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf on entry-level contracts making $750 or whatever they made back then. So the cap is not that difficult to administer. You got to have a guy who's good at it. It's pretty simple math, really. Some projection as far as tagging room and some things to carry into the future. But the league provides really valuable assistance to the teams on that. If you've got a question on how the rules apply to a certain player, you get an answer from the league, and usually in minutes.
Goaltender, to answer your question, I think goaltender is the most important position. The goalie plays 60 minutes in the game. Does that mean you should spend the most money on your goalie? Maybe not. We happen to have 2 top 4 picks a few years ago. We drafted a winger with one and a center with the other. We pay them the most money. If we happen to draft a goalie, the goalie would have been paid the most money. So you got to be careful not to squeeze the money into players who don't deserve it. We happen to have a winger and center. It's probably the direct opposite positions that you want to put the money into. But those are the guys we drafted, number 1 and number 4, and they're pretty good players.
Donnie, I'm guessing the Bruins would say, oh, a shutdown defenseman or a goaltender, most important.
Well, I mean, you can look at our salary cap situation and identify those players. That's pretty easy on everybody's team. That's always going to be impacted, as Don would say, by sometimes your draft, and when you drafted that player. Because eventually he's going to come to roost and deserve, a lion's share of the money. We had a decision to make as to whether or not Tuukka Rask was going to be one of the highest paid players on our team this year. And we felt with the identity of our team and the team philosophy, the way we play, that he was a big part of our success. As to what save percentage is not, but I think in the newer wave statistics, Mark, I know we've talked about this from an expected save percentage of goaltending, as to where those shots are coming from, what goaltenders make that particular save based on the philosophy and the style of play. That has to line up with your coach. If your coach changes, things might change along with that, and new players come in. It's awfully difficult, Brian, you correct me if I'm wrong, going to market and just plug and play a guy in. We got fortunate that Zdeno Chara was on there a few years ago, and again, that helps shape the team identity, and you work around that. But those are going to be the core guys. Baseball says strength up the middle. Well, that's how the Bruins are built at this point in time, and the pieces around it, be it some entry-level players like Riley Smith and Torrey Krug that have been implemented into there, we're fortunate. We can use the performance bonus side of things to sort of exceed the cap at a period of time that will come back to punish you later on if you're an LTI. So all these factors come into play when you're going to make these decisions, but ultimately your team philosophy is how you've developed players within the identity of how your team is going to play.
And I think on that, what I'd say to that too, to go back to what Donnie just said is, there used to be a player got the big dough on his 3rd contract. So it used to be entry level, bridge contract, big dough. Now that bridge contract has virtually disappeared in our league. And so top young players are coming from that first contract into a 6 or 7 year deal at serious dough. You see the Montreal Canadiens actually did a bridge contract with PK Subban. You're going to see the impact of that this year because now he's up again. But that's been the biggest development, and that's why Donnie's right. On July 1st, the players that get to unrestricted free agency on July 1st have not been impact players the last few years because teams are locking up those young players to 6 to 8 year deals before they get to July 1st.
And yet those players, but those players are still impacting the comparable side of things because other guys are saying, well, I've done this. The younger player might not even exceed those expectations yet. So you end up paying it on both sides.
Eric, when an agent sits in front of Brian Burke or Don Sweeney or Don Fishman or any other general manager in the league and makes a case for what he wants his client to get, what do you think are the statistics beyond goals, assists, and points for a forward, or save percentage and goals against average for a goaltender? What are the advanced analytics that agent wants to use to try to negotiate with these guys?
Yeah, well, so there's 2 things. One is we have analytics that look at how the player's used, so quality of competition he faces, how often he starts in the defensive zone, and that sort of thing can help shape, how important is this guy to your team? You're leaning on him really heavily to play those tough minutes, so don't expect him to have a ton of goals if you're putting him in those really tough situations. And it can put a little bit of context around it and help, sort of provide that edge. And then there's also the possession metrics, and, is the ice tilting forwards whenever he's out there? Maybe the team's a horse shit team, but when the great player's out there, they're less horse shit than the rest of the time. And that can work for him too, right? And we can pull that out of the data too, and that's what Corsi and relative Corsi help us to do.
The most elaborate, misguided, if you ever want to see statistics misused, sit in on a salary arbitration in the National Hockey League. The creativity is staggering.
Well, I've always thought about that, and in the Bruins case, it was always when the Bruins and Ray Bourque went to arbitration. And I thought...
And
God,
lost.
And lost, as they should have. But I was thinking to myself...
No, Ray lost.
Yeah. The last thing I want to do if I'm a player is sit there. Because your job is to make him look as marginal, quote unquote, as you possibly can from a financial perspective. And the agent's job is to make that player look as important to you guys as he possibly can. The player gets stuck. If I was a player, I would never sit in on one of those hearings, ever.
But it's not high-low arbitration, so the player wins every time he goes anyway. Like the guy almost always splits a baby, so the player gets a massive raise even if he loses. I'd rather go to a baseball system with high-low where there's two envelopes and the arbitrator's got to choose one. So we've got to be fair when we present our case. And we have to have a supportable case. And the philosophy, just so people in the room are clear, my instructions are not to get my player at the cheapest price available. We want our players paid fairly. I want them at the lowest number that's fair. But I can't have a player who thinks he's not being treated fairly. Now, his idea of fair and mine are seldom the same. But whatever that low number is, if the range that's fair for this player is 2.4 to 2.7, I want him at 2.4. We're in a hard cap system. I'm not saving that money. I'm going to spend it on a different player. So I want him at the lowest fair number, but I don't want him cheap. I don't want him at an unfair number. So it's pretty hard to keep team harmony and consistency. It's every player you sign, you got to worry about how he impacts on the rest of your team. And as Donnie said, how you build that cap model going forward. So the notion that we want a player for $1, we don't want a player for $1. Because that's going to cost us somewhere down the road. The player's going to say, all right, you screwed me for 5 years, now I'm going to get paid. We want to pay the lowest fair number that we can pay to get that player. And that gives us consistent principles with our other players as they come up.
There was a coach who spoke earlier today, I believe it was George Karl, who said, I want to be unpredictable as a coach. I would suggest, Mark, that the analytics of hockey would tell you that's the last thing you want to be. There's some predictability involved in offensive zone face-off, this is who I want. Defensive zone face-offs, this is who I want. If it's just an arbitrary, what the hell, go out and take the draw, it's probably not going to serve your team very well.
Yeah, and again, at our level, I don't know how well the players would respond to that. We try to put in some structure, and to be honest, as a coach, part of why I use statistics or analytics, whatever you want to call it, is I'm a salesperson. So when I step up in front of my team and I say, this is what we're going to do, it's nice to have the numbers sort of behind you. You tend to get in front of that group with a little bit more confidence. When you put a line together and they go out and play, and maybe they don't score, but you see that, they're tilting the ice, to use Eric's term. You go back in that locker room with a little more bounce in your step. So, it definitely helps.
But I thought George Karl made a great point that what's great about unpredictability and randomness is the way the defenses respond. And all coaches on all sports need to understand that if you can be a little bit unpredictable or a little bit random, it's going to yield results beyond what you might draw up on the blackboard, because defenses are not going to know how to respond. I think in our sport, the easiest comparison is the power play. Teams draw up a certain power play, defenses respond a certain way. It's similar to a basketball formation in the half court, and a little bit of randomness is probably a good thing.
Have you guys had a chance to take a look at this new analytic? It came out of Edmonton. And it's an attempt, it's called the Coaching Activity Index. Have you guys seen this yet? A guy by the name of Michael Parcati, who's manager of economic research and analysis for the government of Alberta, came up with this. He looked at all the different factors for coaching, how you put your line combinations together, how you utilize your players, offensive zone, defensive zone, things like that. And he tried to come up with an index of how your team would perform for that coach. Now, the interesting thing is, up till the Olympic break, the number one coach in the Coaching Activity Index is Joel Quenneville. Number two is Claude Julien. If you look at the teams that are at the top, his index kind of fits. Have you guys ever tried to do any sort of analytic analysis or any analysis at all, Berkey, of how your coach operates and how he runs his team? Or is it just what your eyeballs tell you?
Well, you got to start with a philosophy. Like you want to play a certain style. You know, the reason I've said this before at this conference, the reason I would never do Moneyball if I were a baseball general manager is because it's boring. Like, I want to entertain the fans. You know, my teams, we try not to trap. We try to hit in all three zones. We fight. We trade chances. Like, it's not a safe model. Like, I have to entertain people. So I hire coaches who are hard on the players during the game. I like a confrontational coach. I like crude teams. I like hard to play against teams. I like physical teams. So you've got to have a philosophy. You start with a blank canvas. You get to choose how your team plays. And I think you got to hire a coach that fits that philosophy. Like watching the last panel there with the Atlanta guys, your coach has to share your exact vision on how the game's played or you're doomed. The tandem is doomed and your team's probably going to struggle. You know, you've got to have a style. And you know, my teams are known for being, the Flames aren't there yet, but my teams are known for being big and obnoxious, and my coach is going to play it the same way or I'll get a new coach.
Interestingly enough, Don Fishman, by the way, I think Adam Oates was number 9 on this index right now. Your coach probably was higher rated than your record would indicate, Berkey, in this case. I think he was in the mid-20s or something, like low 20s.
And see, part of this is you can rate the coaches all you want. The coach starts the game with the players that we give him. So we're directly accountable for whether he's successful or not over the long term. And I think there's not enough patience with coaches in our business where we don't draft well enough or we don't develop well enough. Our phases, you draft, then you develop, then they get to the NHL. If we fail in either phase, the coach is an idiot because he's playing with players who aren't good enough to compete. So a lot of times where we don't do our job, we blame the coach and fire the coach. But this guy, you know, he works for the government of Alberta. I'm sure it's nice. We'll take a look at it sometime.
I knew you'd like it, by the way. That's why I brought it up. I will also say when I traveled with the Red Sox a few years ago, I got a look at the notebook that Terry Francona was handed at the beginning of every series. A incredible statistical breakdown, scouting breakdown. This is what they do in this situation. It could numb your mind if you tried to go through all of it. But they're playing a 3 or a 4 game series. Maybe you can get some use out of it. You guys all play 82 one-night stands. I mean, it would paralyze a coach to try to go through the same volume of information. Having said that, Eric, if you were going to hand Claude Julien or Adam Oates or any other coach in the NHL a bunch of statistics before a game tonight that would help him, what would you give him?
Yeah, so I've done that a little bit, and what I've always tried to gear it towards is sussing out things about the team's style and tendencies. So I'm looking for, you know, how they deploy different lines, for which players are most likely to be aggressive with the puck, and you know, that sort of stuff that can break down how a team sets up their offense and their defense, how they try to structure things, because that seems like the kind of thing that you can use in advance and try to figure out how you want to work against that. You know, they don't need me to tell them that Patrice Bergeron's a good player. But knowing some details about how he achieves that, what sort of style he plays might be helpful.
Go ahead, Don.
The one thing that you've got to be very careful with, in my opinion, is most hockey players and coaches are visual learners. They, most of the time, are looking at a diagram to see a drill or to see what the forecheck's going to do and how we're going to, attack that or break it down. So if you just hand, whether it's a coach or anybody else, statistical data, if you don't blend that with some sort of video component to it, it's going to get washed. You have to be able to say, okay, this is how this player is going to react based on these numbers, and link it to the visual component, to the video component of it. And that's where I think the system that we've sort of moved to from a game-by-game analysis. So the coaches, they'll make their own adjustments. I mean, after the playing, they're handed their shifts of all the players and the breakdowns and scoring chances. They're already looking at the tendencies for the next game or for your own game and how you defend it. It certainly becomes paramount in the playoffs because you are, seeing that team over and over and over, and you have to come up with the creativity side of it to break those things down. So I think where the two merge together is where you get a lot more value.
I agree with that, and I think, but again, to me, that's statistics and mathematics, not analytics. Like face-off percentage on one side versus the other, number of times they run a scissors play off a face-off, that's statistical, it's counting. It's keeping track of stuff. It's not taking that and extrapolating things from it. So to me, if Eric gives me a sheet and he says Bergeron on his right-hand side, on his backhand wins 72% of the faceoffs, and he's 44 the other way, that tracks just about every center in the league at some point. And we'd have that data. And I'm with Donnie. The players respond much better to video than they do. They're used to watching film. Baseball, I think, is the sport that lends itself most to this analysis. It's a series of repetitive events at identical distances over time. The pitch comes from the same distance every time. The batter stands in the same area every time. All right? It's easy to predict what happens. It's easy to track what happens. We play a spontaneous game where smart players don't repeat things. The best players actually mix it up constantly. And we play a full contact sport. Right? A guy standing at the plate doesn't have to worry about someone running him over from behind. There's a whole element of our game. It's full contact. It's not just allowed, it's encouraged. Right? That's not in the statistics. Is a guy going to carry that puck down the wall when Zdeno Chara's coming over? Okay, so there's a lot to it. Again, you ignore statistics at your peril. They do help you track and predict what things do. And we would be the first team. If someone comes up with this analysis that I haven't seen yet that makes us better predictors, we'll buy it. We'll make sure no one else can buy it. So we're all looking for that edge, but it hasn't materialized in my mind yet in hockey as an analytics tool. This is statistics and mathematics that we're talking about. And we've all used those. That goes back 50 years. It's a little more sophisticated now, but that's not analytics. That's why I get frustrated at this conference, because we're supposed to be talking about analytics, and to me, we're talking mathematics. We're counting things.
I'll tell you what I put in that book that I'd hand to the manager of the Nationals or the manager or the coach of the Capitals. I try to isolate the things in hockey that are like baseball, that are isolated incidents that are similar to batter against pitcher. I'd start with shootouts first. I give an in-depth analysis of the shootout tendencies of the goaltender and the shooters from the other team. I put that in chapter 1. In chapters 2 and 3, I talk about the power play and the penalty kill. Those are unique parts of the game that each team has its own strategy, its own tendencies. You enter the offensive zone, you attack in a certain way. Or when you're penalty killing, you're in your zone and you're defending a certain way. Finally, I'd probably close out chapter 4 with the opposing goaltender. That's one thing you're going to see for all 60 minutes. You're going to see that goalie in the net for all 60 minutes. If you can get a little edge there in understanding that goalie, just like you can understand the pitcher you're going to face for 6 or 7 innings, you're probably going to have an edge.
You know, I might add in terms of, because I would agree, that's exactly where I think the empirical data necessarily lines up with what's going on in the game. The rest of it's in variables. But the NHL tracks where every goal is scored in the National Hockey League. So that you do not, necessarily have to dispute. We look at it and say, I can look at it from a development tool and say to a young player and say, if you're over here and all the goals are scored over here, what do you think is going to happen? Even though the goals are random events, you're not in the game. And realize that you have to be in the areas where goals are going to be scored. And on what types of goaltenders? Well, this guy doesn't give up rebounds, this guy does. If you don't get to the rebound opportunity and you know what they are, then you're not going to score. Those are things where you can blend them together.
And lastly, if I can add one more thing too, Brian talked about style of play. I think everybody's talked about style of play up here. You're not going to completely change the way you play based on a scouting report. There are going to be things you accentuate. What we talk to our guys about are, hey, these are some of the parts of our game. These are some of the parts of the things that we want to do on a consistent basis that might work against this team, whether it's a face-off play or, like you said, power play. So you're not going to completely, put the brakes on and do a 180. The game moves too fast. There's too many decisions to be made.
I think it's safe to say that the National Hockey League probably lags behind the other 3 major pro sports in North America in terms of analytics and some of these things. I think that the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball are a little ahead of the NHL in that regard. What has to change, in your opinion, Eric, for the NHL to step forward in some of these things if you think that they do lag behind?
Yeah, they do for sure. And, it comes back to what Brian was just saying about it being sort of a complicated, messy game. And it's hard to pull discrete events out of that. And, I think what has to change is the video analysis has to get a lot better so that we're pulling out a lot more data. Right now I can tell you whether the team tended to be in the offensive zone when this guy's on the ice. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you what he did unless I'm watching video and pulling things out of it. And we need to get to where that video analysis is automated so that we can start to pull out, if we had every touch of the puck that a guy had, we could do a lot more to say how he's moving the puck forwards, or whether it's his line mates who are doing it and he just happens to be on a good line.
My guess is the guy at the end of the line is going to say, you couldn't say why, because you're an analytics guy and that's what you do. You need a coach to tell you that stuff, right? You need a coach to say, this is why he does what he does.
Yeah, that would be my response. But again, I think you don't want to sound like a dinosaur. Like, you ignore innovation in the game at your peril. And the people that succeed in this game embrace innovation. So if Eric can come up with a system that makes us better, we'll buy it. I just haven't seen it yet. So it's not a case of saying there's no place for this in our game. It's more a case of saying, I haven't seen it yet, and I'll buy it the second it's available.
Is it fair to say that part of this is at an ownership level? Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Washington Capitals, made his money at AOL, is on the board of a lot of different companies, has brought technical innovation to his own individual franchise, and my guess is a guy like Ted Leonsis is more willing to embrace advanced analytics than Jeremy Jacobs is. From the ownership perspective, I'm just guessing that would be the case. Do you think that's fair?
I think most owners of pro sports teams want to, just like Brian said, they don't want to be dinosaurs. They want to advance and embrace technology. What I love to see hockey do to catch up with the other sports is we're a fluid game. We're a complicated game. That's why we love our sport. That's why our sport, I think, is better than all the other sports, because we're not just a series of isolated incidents. So on the analytical side, let's stop being obsessed with trying to capture the entire game and come up with some magic formula to capture that whole game, because we can't. It's a beautiful piece of art. It's this creative piece of art with hundreds of colors in different ways. Why don't we let's learn about discrete areas and focus on different areas of the game, and let's see if we can nail those. I'd love to see someone nail the shootouts. Come up with something. It decided the U.S.-Russia game. If someone could nail the shootout and help us win the U.S.-Russia game every year, that'd be awesome.
Is there something, Berkey, from an analytic perspective that you have charged your people with trying to come up with? Is there something you've said to your scouts, to your player personnel people, look, figure out this?
No, we try and spend more time evaluating the character of the player. Going into the draft, we try and learn more about the player as a person, his family, support system, talk to, even grammar school teachers, what level of discipline the player exhibited at an age, both parents work. We've tried to go back and find out more about the player. I told the story here a couple years ago about the Trevor Linden draft story. And, just to abbreviate it, we were supposed to bring Trevor Linden in for testing his draft year in '88. And he called me on Thursday night and said he couldn't come. I said, why can't you come? He said, it's branding day on Saturday, and my dad says I have to stay and help at my uncle's ranch. So I said, well, what's branding day? I'm kind of a city guy. He said, well, we run range cattle up here, and in the spring we round them up, and we brand the calves that the cattle have had over the winter, and we turn the young male cattle into steers. And I said, well, what's your job? He says, well, when they come in the pen, I grab them by the neck and hold them down while we brand them and cut their nuts off. So I said, you can skip our test, kid. So, that's what we focus on. We try and identify the character of the players more, upbringing, willingness to fit into a scheme, coachability, more than analytics. And again, let's not confuse analytics with arithmetic.
I think Berkey's right in terms of, you think about a young man, when he's being drafted, that's not a finished product. A lot of the time the analytics are being done much closer to what's helping you win, a lot further removed from where a player's being drafted. It's pretty tough to measure, the maturity level at times of a player. Sometimes it's just developed at a little later age and they need a little more, seasoning, as we say. And lo and behold, you get closer along, you realize like, wow, that one really worked.
We start our scouting meeting every year with a mistake. We start by finding a player another team took after we picked that turned into a player. And we go back and we look at all the reports we filed. Did we see him enough? Did we have him right? Did we get it right? Not beating up the scouts, but to make sure we don't repeat that mistake. We used Patrice Bergeron one year. How did he get drafted as late as he did? How did that many teams, not just us, how did all those teams pass on him? We used the Shaw kid from Chicago one year. So we go back to try and get better at it. What did we miss? Let's go look at the reports we filed on this kid. And it was too small, too slow, whatever it is. And let's not make that mistake again. Let's not ignore the intangibles, the willpower. or the hockey IQ of a Bergeron that's made him a better player than his physical skill set should have allowed him to be, and his determination, let's not make that mistake again. And that's not data, that's digging.
Let's talk about the art of the deal for a moment. The Bruins made a huge trade last July 4th. They traded Tyler Seguin as part of a package. Rich Peverly was part of it as well, to the Dallas Stars, and they received 4 players in return. You were in the room when this was all going down. Heck, we were in the room, thanks to Behind the B, for part of it. What are you guys looking at when you make that decision, when you're saying, okay, we're getting enough back to do this deal? What are the things you're looking at?
Well, that's, as Berkey said, that's Peter having a lot of courage. You know, we know Tyler Seguin is a tremendous player, and know he's going to have a tremendous career. He helped us win a Stanley Cup. I think we looked at it from the players we're getting back and the identity, and sort of we were in a transitional phase. Nathan Horton had decided to leave. We were in a situation where we had to replace. We had to find some value, some players that fit into the identity and philosophy of our group, that maybe the sum of the parts would add up to what we thought was a star player, and we knew was a star player in Tyler. And you know, we went about along the same lines of digging and asking and having conference calls and scouts and saying, are you sure you're seeing on this player? Is he going to fit into it? And really unearthing and making some calls on people to say, hey, you know, you don't want to make a mistake in this one. And ultimately, you know, we want trades to work out for both sides, and I think this case hopefully will play out that way. We also looked at it and said, within the window that we feel like we have an opportunity to win, these players will help us stay within that window and help us move it along. Not that Tyler wouldn't, because we had already proven, and Rich in the same way. We had won a Stanley Cup with those players. But sometimes hard choices have to be made, and Peter made that hard choice. But we felt like we've got players back that are going to help us continue to win now and in the future.
We've got some questions from the audience members, and the questions here don't necessarily specify in all cases specific people to ask, so I'm going to move it around a little bit. But the first one says, Mark, when you recruit 14 to 18-year-old players, how much analysis is visual, how much is statistical? I'm not sure how many 14-year-olds you recruit. But.
No, but it's a trend that has begun at our level for sure. We have to use a little more video probably than we'd like. We don't have the same budgets. Thankfully, a lot of the junior hockey leagues throughout North America now televise their games. We actually went through a process with a couple guys we were looking at just this week where my assistant coach literally went back, and this is labor intensive, but actually went back and looked at every goal that both of those guys scored to see what kind of goals they were. You know, goals are harder to come by every level you go up. And in our game, most of the goals are 3 yards in a pile of dust because there's 9 guys in the crease and they've got to go to the review. And so we're looking for guys that are willing to go to the dirty areas and get greasy goals. And so we use it a lot. And it also helps us because of our budgets. You know, we do get to British Columbia. We've actually been to Sweden. But we can't go there that often, and the internet and video helps in that regard.
Eric, do you think we'll ever see a stat for a hockey player similar to WAR for a baseball player?
So I get asked a lot why I haven't made a WAR, and the answer, I mean, like Brian says, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we know enough. So right now, you know, it's pretty tough. Will we get there eventually? Sure. I mean, you know, someday in the future we'll have everything you could ever want to know tracked and you can piece it together. But right now what we can do well is tease out components. And then you kind of need a human to look at it and think about it and, you know, decide which of those components, you know, how to balance those. What matters most for someone I want in this role?
If you got here early enough, as I did, I had a chance to look at some of the research papers out in the hall. One had to do with an analysis of how teams have performed since adding the extra point for a win and loss and a tie and all that stuff. Don Fishman, the question says here, should the NHL follow the Olympic model and award 3 points for a win in regulation, 2 for overtime or shootout?
I wouldn't mind that. I don't think you're going to see it happen because the NHL for so long has had this tradition of 2 points. We're never going to get there. But we do have a rule change a few years ago that rewards you in the tiebreaker if you can win games in regulation or overtime. So we've already gone a small step there to sort of recognize that we like teams to win in regulation or overtime versus a shootout. But there's no question there is some unfairness in our sport now with the point system, in that there are these 3-point games, and it affects it. It affects it in the stretch run.
Do you guys like a point for losing?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'm surprised, really, I am. Although
Coaches do.
that horseshit team thing you were talking about earlier, but
The point system we use keeps the races close. It keeps teams in contention. People can argue, purists can say that that's not a noble goal, but it is. Again, the Bruins have had a lot of success in recent years. So have Washington, but I remember when Washington played to an empty building and wasn't successful, and they were very happy for the points then. I don't like the shootout. I think it's a circus stunt. To me, it's like NFL games being decided by football, or the quarterbacks throwing footballs through tires. I think it's horseshit, but TV loves it. Our fans love it. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And they did a study when they went to 3 points for a regulation win in the Premier League in England. I actually read this thing, and the reason I didn't go look at any papers is I don't want to feel more stupid than I feel most of the time anyhow. These kids would have to explain everything in there to me. But they studied this, and I read the study in its entirety and felt it had no impact. Our players would much rather win in regulation. Like that shouldn't be, it should be intuitive. Okay, you get to get off the ice earlier and shower and go out with your girlfriend if you win in regulation. And the other team gets no points. So let's see. Do we have an incentive to win in regulation? Yes. I don't think that changes anything, and it didn't in the Premier League, the study I read. So I like the system we have. It does keep the races close. Fish is right about one thing. The shootout is going to determine this year at least 3 or 4 playoff races are going to be decided by the shootout. And that's certainly not an impact that when we voted this in, that we anticipated. There is a move afoot to amend or modify overtime so that fewer games get to the shootout. You might make overtime 7 minutes instead of 5, play 4-on-4 for 4 minutes, then 3-on-3. 3-on-3, you should theoretically get more results. But no, the shootout is here to stay, and it's going to decide several playoff races, no question about it.
Don Sweeney, this is kind of a combination general manager coaching question, but I find it interesting. It's the never-ending question. How do you determine how long to keep struggling players, particularly struggling young players? How do you get that line between, I know what I think this guy is, but he's not showing me that's what he is so far?
Well, I mean, you can hide a player if you're winning. When you're losing, it's pretty tough to hide a guy. You turn around and say, no, let's bring on the next one. So I think you can manage it a little bit in that regard. It depends a little bit where your team is at. If they're in a stage where they're rebuilding, then you can certainly give it a longer and extended period of time for those types of players. I'm an apple for an apple. A lot of times I watch games in the American Hockey League, and players that are playing a particular position, I don't expect them to go up and be just the energy guy and run over somebody. That's valid. He might not be playing the best hockey for us, but he suits the best purpose to go up and play the role that he's capable of playing at the National Hockey League level. And then if he exceeds that and goes on to play a higher role, that's great for him. Brad Marchand's a perfect example of that. Went up and elevated his play. So I do believe that we as management and coaches can sort of look at the impact of line combinations. And I think that's, again, where the video and the statistical analysis stuff can play a role. But for the most part, coaches see what they see. And when they break down the video, they're going to put a person in that role until he earns the trust factor from a coach that says, okay, he can handle that situation. And you can't trade anything except for experience. That's the only time you can, so you have to give a person a little bit of rope and see whether or not he can respond in those situations you put him in.
Scotty Bowman addressed that one time. He said, you've got to figure out which of your young players aren't going to make it before everyone else does.
I'll be curious when a study is done of this, and this is subjective totally on my part. My opinion is that the quality of hockey that I just watched in Sochi, Russia, was boring, a lot of it. It wasn't the exciting hockey. And they went to the bigger ice surface, and I thought, the players are so much bigger, we need more room, this is going to be a good thing. And I didn't think the play followed up what I expected. Do you guys agree with that or not? And you were there, Berkey, so.
Well, I was there with Team USA. It was pretty exciting until we played Canada, and then it got way less exciting. I mean, Donnie's heard this speech from me about, I think our rink is too small. Our ice surface is too small. We're playing on the same ice surface. Our rink is 200 feet long by 85 feet wide. The international rink is 100 feet wide, and that 15 feet produces some terrible hockey. I would like to go to the Boston University rink, which is, I think, 91 feet, Mark?
Yep.
91 feet. The new rink in Helsinki is a 91-foot rink. I've been fighting this fight with the NHL now for probably 7 years, that every new building that comes online should have the cooling capacity to go to a bigger surface, but not Olympic. I mean, I saw a game in the Swedish Elite League years ago where the shots on net were 11 to 10. I can't get good money for tickets for that. So the Olympic hockey is exciting at times because you got the 20 best players from the best hockey playing countries, but those guys could play on a bandy rink and it would be exciting. You know, that's how good the players are. But yes, it produced a lot of 1-4 forecheck, a lot of trap. It's all trap. You can't chase the puck there. All the defensive plays stay inside the dots, so there's prolonged periods where teams have possession but nothing happens. It would be a disaster for us to go that big, but I would like to go to a hybrid ice surface. I think it's too small now.
Do you guys agree or no?
Well, I've played on Boston Garden Ice. I've played on most of the rinks in the National Hockey League as well as overseas in the World Championships. And you know, things happen a lot faster. In the Boston Garden, players were on top of you before we realized it. Brian's right. The players, I mean, they're all bigger than I was anyway, but they're much bigger now, and they get on top of you. Injuries are happening not just because a guy's being dumped in a forecheck. They're happening from side to side because players cover ice, and they're just that much bigger. So I do believe there's probably a little room, you know, in the width. It's definitely not at the Olympic level. You know, the space between the dots is still going to remain the same as to where people have to get to, and that's where they're going to want to defend. On the Olympic ice, everybody retreats to that spot. Even on the power play, you let people stay in the perimeter because that's the extra ice. That's the dead areas of the ice. So you have to find, I think, a balance between those two, and I think Brian's probably in the right direction with the newer rinks that come online, that we could probably we could benefit from at least experiment. It's not going to hurt the game by going an extra, 3 feet on either side. I can guarantee you that.
You can watch it here in Boston. You watch a game at BU versus a game at BC, which is Olympic size, right? Still BC.
UNH is Lake
You
Whittemore.
can watch the difference. It's not a case where you have to guess how it impacts. And for the non-hockey fans, we talk about playing between the dots. We play between the face-off dots. That's where your penalty kill, that's where your defensive style is. So when Donnie says the dead area outside the dots that we don't defend, we concede possession there. On a big rink, that's a big area where it's a dead area, and nothing happens. Like, players can skate around with the puck. Go ahead, you're killing the penalty for us. So, but I'd like to see a hybrid. I would. I do think that's something we've got to go to.
I'd be interested in seeing what the penalty totals were with the bigger sheet. Again, 5-on-5 goals are harder to come by. And I know at our level on the Olympic sheets, there's a lot fewer calls. And so there's a lot more 5-on-5 play, a lot more power play opportunities for both teams. But I will say this, I thought that the Olympic sheet looked as small as I've ever seen it with the U.S.-Canada. I mean, I thought there was a lot more pressure. You know, it's almost like we're growing into it, you know. It definitely... Maybe not that big as an Olympic size, maybe like you said, 91 feet, but it didn't look like there was too much space out there at times.
Not in that game. I agree.
At the risk of touching the third rail, there was a conference earlier today, I think it had to do more with football, talking about the analytics of officiating. At what point are you or somebody else going to take on an analysis of officiating in hockey and areas that could be improved upon, or things that maybe don't need to be changed at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some challenges. It's a tough game. It's a lot of things going on in a tight area. I've done some work looking at how different the different referees are, and Michael Shuckers, who's in the audience, has done this too. And there actually aren't as big of a differences between referees as you'd think. So. That tells you they're pretty consistent from one guy to the next, right? They all make some mistakes because they're humans, but the skew in sort of how big their biases are isn't really that large. And so you can work on getting better. Everybody can work on getting better, the refs, the players, everybody. But I don't know that they're pretty uniform in terms of their approach.
Did you guys think that there was an improvement in the National Hockey League when they went with the second referee?
They caught more calls behind the play for sure. You know, when we voted for that, part of the reason we voted for that was to extend the careers of the veteran officials. In the one referee system, the referee skates an average of 9 miles a night. That takes a toll. They skate less than half that with a 2 referee system. So we thought we could keep Billy McCreary and Kerry Fraser and some of the top guys on the ice longer. Definitely fouls behind the play are caught now that were not caught before. Definitely when they huddle, they get some disputed calls correct that they didn't. I mean, officiating is an easy topic to throw rocks. You know, it's easy to criticize officiating. I mean, in the Olympics, the women's game was decided by a series of poor calls. And it's a shame. Forget who won or who you wanted to win. It's a shame when an event of that magnitude rests on refereeing. And I was at the game, the women's game, and there were a couple of just awful calls. And again, not having a stake in who won or lost, but I think our officials have the hardest job in officiating. They've got an athletic requirement that doesn't exist in other sports. They've got to be able to skate and get out of the way, keep up with players. Our game prizes contact. We want the officials to call penalties but not look for penalties. We want contact. It's a full contact sport. The difference between a 2-minute penalty and a highlight, you know, that Nesson will show, a big hit by Chara, the difference might be the arm is here versus here. And so these are very subtle things they see in real time with bodies flying around them on skates. They do a magnificent job, and they do make mistakes, but I think our officials are terrific. And you watch hockey at other levels. When I watch Mark's team play, I have a problem with some of the officiating in the American League, Donnie, I think you'd agree, with their young guys coming up, and you see some mistakes that you just don't see in our league. We've got the best.
Mark, you don't have any problems with officials, do you?
No comment.
That's what I thought. Because you got a game tonight, right?
We've got the best officials in Division I hockey.
Attaboy. Gentlemen, it was fun talking hockey with you. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.